Welcome to this tutorial on how to calculate the return on investment of IT automation. Today, we're going to show you various methods for quantifying the value IT automation can provide to your enterprise. Today's tutorial is going to focus on 4 ROI formulas. Task automation, the monetary value of freed up time for IT personnel. IT automation eliminates the need for a lot of manual tasks, so applying this formula to each task you plan to automate will help you figure out the annual savings per task. Downtime reduction. This refers to downtime that costs your organization both productivity and business losses. Reducing or avoiding downtime altogether yields big savings in avoided outage time. This formula determines how much you save from that. Mean time to resolution. Anyone who's ever worked a service desk knows this metric. How long, on average, does it take you to restore a system to its operational state after a failure? Minimizing that time with IT automation can yield some of the biggest quantifiable savings for an organization. Soft ROI. Last but not least, let's also assign a value, monetary or otherwise, to benefits which are valuable but difficult to measure. Automating IT tasks will immediately increase the productivity of your IT staff by eliminating routine, repetitive tasks, as well as many of the errors that occur when performing them manually. Instead of spending time configuring computers, freeing up server disk space, resetting passwords for Active Directory users, etc., IT personnel are freed up to focus on more important and higher value work. Now, please note that savings from IT process automation are incremental. So while automating a 20-minute task may seem insignificant, your perspective quickly changes when you realize the task is performed 10 times a day, and there's hundreds of other tasks just like it performed on a weekly basis. So here's the basic formula for figuring out how to calculate task automation savings. It starts with the first variable, which is time. Time spent on performing a single manual task. You take that amount of time and multiply it by the frequency of times that task is performed every month. You then multiply it by the next variable, which is cost per hour. The cost per hour for a contractor should be a straightforward calculation, but for a salaried employee, don't forget to add in benefits, such as health insurance, retirement benefits, education assistance, etc. Finally, you multiply all that by 12 months to figure out the yearly savings of automating just one task. Let's run through an example. Say, for instance, you do regular server maintenance manually once a week on one or more servers, and that takes 5 hours to complete. Since it's a weekly task, let's multiply it by a frequency of 4 times per month. Then let's say that your organization's average cost of labor for the person performing that task is $75 an hour. Your mileage may vary, of course. Finally, let's multiply this all out by 12 for the number of months in a year. If we automate just this one task, this yields us a savings of $18,000 per year. Not too bad. At this point, some of you may be wondering which tasks you could automate that would yield these kinds of savings. Well, there are literally thousands of tasks that any data center or network operations center can automate, but here are the 10 most popular tasks that our customers automate. Password resets/account unlocks. In some cases, as much as 40% of your IT support personnel's workload is comprised of this simple task, which is almost universally handled manually. By the way, Gartner estimates that password management costs companies $250 per user per year. Add up those charges for your own environment and imagine how much of an impact eliminating that cost would have on your organization's bottom line. Freeing up server disk space. One of the most frequent causes of unscheduled downtime for applications are a critical lack of disk space. In fact, insufficient disk space on one of your SQL servers, IIS applications, or Exchange server can be more disruptive than any other system or network failure. Automating this task is a must. Shutting down remote computers. This one is all about reducing energy consumption and cutting IT operational costs. Automating the process of putting all network-connected idle computers or servers on standby mode saved one of our customers, a large bank, over $2,000 per day. That's nearly $750,000 over the course of a year. How about that for ROI? I'll go through the rest of these kind of quickly so we can move on to the next formula, but they're all great candidates for automation in just about any environment. Monitoring files and folders, restarting Windows services, automating SQL queries, changing service account passwords, monitoring Windows event logs, automating VMware tasks, and incident escalation process. Next up, we're going to calculate the ROI of downtime savings. The cost of system downtime will obviously vary from company to company based on the size of the business, the industry it's in, SLAs, etc. But in all cases, downtime costs depend on two primary factors: productivity losses and business losses. The good news is that IT automation can help reduce both significantly. This is going to be a two-step formula. The first variable is the hourly loss of revenues in US dollars. This is the cost of an hour of downtime of your critical systems. Now, you'll probably have to consult your organization's business people to get accurate numbers on this, but you have to consider both the loss of revenue and the loss of productivity. Then we take that and multiply it by the average duration of system downtime in hours. This is information you can often glean from your ticketing system based on previous incident history. You then take that and multiply it by the average number of outages per year, and that will yield the first element of our formula, which is yearly downtime costs. We then take that number and go to step B. Take yearly downtime costs and carry it over so we can multiply it by the reduced outages we've experienced as a percentage due to IT automation. Now, you might be wondering what's an appropriate number to use for that percentage. Well, in our experience, it typically ranges anywhere from 10 to 50%. But let's be conservative and say 10%, and when we multiply it out, we get a number representing yearly savings. Okay, let's walk through an example starting with step A. Assume the hourly loss of revenues for a decently sized organization in US dollars is $100,000 per hour. Your mileage, of course, may vary, but consider this. A Gartner research vice president by the name of Andrew Lerner has stated that at Gartner, they typically cite $5,600 per minute as the average cost of downtime, which extrapolates to well over $300,000 per hour. Also, Avaya published a study indicating that based on their research, the range for cost of downtime is anywhere from $140,000 to $540,000 per hour. Those are just some industry averages, of course, and ultimately, you need to calculate the outage cost as it specifically pertains to your organization. Okay, now take the hourly loss and multiply it by the average duration of system downtime in hours. For simplicity's sake, we're going to say 1 hour. Then multiply that by the number of outages per year, and let's say that this outage happens once a month for a total of 12 outages per year. That produces our yearly downtime costs of $1.2 million. Next, we move on to step B. Let's take that $1.2 million number and multiply it by the reduced outages as a percentage due to automation. And let's be conservative and say that we can save 10% thanks to IT automation. When we do the math, that results in yearly savings of $120,000. By the way, as you can see by now, doing the math is actually pretty easy. You just need to know what numbers are appropriate for your organization. Next, we're going to move on to calculating mean time to resolution savings, or MTTR for short. MTTR is a measure of how long, on average, it takes to restore a system to its operational state after a failure. It's commonly argued that 60% of MTTR is spent in the diagnosis phase, that is, just finding the root cause of a problem. But there's also a large chunk of system failures that don't require extensive investigation, and they can be quickly identified and resolved with predefined actions. In those cases, IT automation really helps reduce MTTR. Okay, this is another two-step formula, so let's dive in. The first variable to consider in step A is the number of incidents per month. Regardless of severity or priority, just calculate as a bulk number the number of incidents per month your organization experiences. Then multiply that out by the average amount of time it takes to resolve each incident, again, regardless of severity, priority, or what level of technician resolved it. Then we take that and multiply it by the average cost of personnel per hour to remediate an incident. And then once again, we multiply that out by 12 months to get the yearly cost of incidents. Okay, now we take yearly cost of incidents as the first variable of step B and multiply it by the reduced time it takes to resolve those incidents as a percentage due to automation. And that finally will generate our yearly savings. Here's an example. Let's say the number of incidents we experience per month is a round number, 100 incidents. Let's also say the average time to resolve an incident is 1 hour. Some are more, some are less, but we'll say 1 hour is the average. And then let's say that the cost of personnel per hour on average is $75. Same number we used earlier. Finally, we multiply that by 12 months, and that will yield a yearly cost of incidence of $90,000 in this example. Now we move on to step B. Take that $90,000 number and multiply it by the reduced time to resolve as a percentage due to automation. As before, your mileage may vary, but I can tell you that in our experience, we've had great results using automation to reduce the time spent on resolving incidents. So we're going to use a very conservative real-world number here based on that experience of 50%. Multiplying that out will yield a yearly savings of $45,000. Again, not too bad. This brings us to soft ROI savings. Your ROI analysis typically has to have a hard dollar value attached to it, but IT automation also delivers a range of soft benefits that can be difficult to measure. Nonetheless, many organizations will claim they are no less important. So while you may not base your decision on soft ROI savings, they should definitely be considered. This includes things like knowledge management. Automating processes and procedures forces you to think about and document extremely valuable organizational knowledge that usually only resides in people's heads. Training. The average time to train a level 1 support technician before he or she becomes productive is about 3 months. Automation and knowledge management reduce this cost dramatically. Consistency and auditability. With IT automation, you establish repeatable IT processes. These processes can be improved over time and do not depend on individuals being present. For auditing purposes, every automated action taken is recorded and documented, and that has a value. Human errors. When you automate processes, you're reducing manual work so that errors, particularly in long, multi-step procedures, are eliminated. Compliance and regulation. Automation helps you comply with regulations such as SOX, PCI, HIPAA, and others. It also accelerates the implementation of best practice frameworks like ITIL. Those are the 4 main ROI formulas we've developed. Now, let's total them up from each of our examples to determine the full ROI savings we've quantified. Task automation, the first formula, saved us $18,000. Then in downtime reduction, we achieved an ROI savings of $120,000. The improvement in MTTR yielded another $45,000 in savings. And finally, the soft ROI generated an indeterminate value, so we'll just leave a placeholder for it. But keep in mind that it's definitely providing value, it's just that it varies wildly from organization to organization. If we total all that up, we realize a total savings of $183,000 in year 1. But you know what? IT automation is the gift that keeps on giving, or stated another way, it's the tool that keeps on saving. I say that because if the savings are true for year 1, then they're certainly true for year 2, year 3, and I could keep going on, but I ran out of chalkboard. So if you just calculate the savings from 3 years of IT automation, that will yield an ROI of over $500,000. That's a lot of ROI. Let's take a look at a real-world example of an ROI calculation we provided to one of our customers. These numbers are from an actual client of ours in financial services, but for obvious reasons we're going to keep them anonymous. I'd like to draw your attention to a few notable things. First off, note how we did an ROI calculation that extended out for 3 years. It's very important to realize and emphasize that ROI savings are not a one-time benefit. Second, note that we gave a range of estimates in the form of realistic and conservative numbers. This provides the client with some flexibility in choosing the story they want to pitch to management. We then carried the numbers down and calculated the ROI for each year based on the original investment. As you can see, the numbers quickly grew geometrically. Finally, we totaled up the extended 3-year numbers and even calculated the time in months till the customer reached break-even. As a next step, I strongly encourage you to visit our website at yahoo.com and download a free ebook we published called How to Measure IT Process Automation Return on Investment. It goes into more depth on the formulas I covered today and has a lot more valuable information that will prove very handy for those of you tasked with calculating the ROI of IT automation for your organization. Also, if you'd like some assistance quantifying the costs and benefits of IT automation, we'll be happy to provide you with a free ROI consultation so you can determine if the numbers make sense for your organization.